Welcome to the channel. If you're into true unexplained stories and tales that crawl under your skin, then you're in the right place. Let me tell you about something that's haunted me for years. Something that didn't even happen to me, but to someone I trust more than most people I've ever met. My name is Gregory. This is a story my old friend Ian told me countless times. Something that happened to him many years ago. I recently asked him to write out the details, and he gave me permission to share it here, because I always found it so deeply unsettling. Ian was the kind of guy you only needed to meet once to know he was the real deal. In his 50s, solid build, skin toughened from decades of working in salt air. He worked in marine salvage and coastal infrastructure. If something broke near the water, Ian was the guy you called to fix it. But he wasn't just a contractor. He'd been a diver, ship technician, even did remote inspections for the government. The man had seen it all. So when he told me this story, I didn't doubt a word of it. He said it happened back in 2013. He'd been hired by a small county up in Washington state to inspect an old decommissioned lighthouse. The county had inherited the property and didn't know what to do with it. Developers wanted to tear it down, historians wanted to preserve it, and nobody wanted to pay for it. Ian's task was simple: go out there alone, assess the place, and determine whether restoration was even possible. The lighthouse sat on a remote rock island about an hour from the mainland. Not much to it, just a chunk of rock maybe 300 feet wide, with the lighthouse, a rusted generator shed, and some broken scaffolding. The place hadn't been touched in decades. No docks, no markers, just a ledge where a small Coast Guard boat could drop someone off during high tide. Ian packed light enough food for 4 days. Sleeping bag, tools, clipboard, and a two-way marine radio. The plan dropped off Monday. Full walkthrough by Wednesday. Call for pickup Thursday. Solo missions were routine for Ian. When he arrived, the place was cold, cloudy, but calm. The air had that sour mix of salt, metal, and decay, standard for abandoned coastal sites. The lighthouse stood about 50 feet high, built in the early 1900s, with a classic spiral staircase that led to the beacon room, though the lens hadn't worked in years. The structure itself looked solid. Ian did his checks: support beams, stairwells, windows. First floor warped but stable, second floor mostly empty. Third had an unused sleeping area. He rolled out his sleeping bag near the generator room, warmer and protected from wind. First night, uneventful, but eerily quiet. Not just no people quiet, dead quiet. No birds, no insects, not even waves slapping the rocks, just soft wind. The second day, thick fog rolled in. Ian said it was like staring at a wall so dense it looked solid. Still, fog wasn't new for the area. He spent the day assessing the upper stairwell. That's when the first odd thing happened. Halfway up the stairs to the beacon room, there was a built-in maintenance closet. On day one, the hinges were too corroded to open, but now it was cracked open just an inch, still enough to show it had moved. Ian assumed humidity had shifted it, but inside he saw something. An old wooden box, lunchbox sized, coated in wet, seaweed-like moss. It looked like it had just been dredged up from underwater. He didn't open it, just closed the door again, and made a note. That night, something woke him. Not a sound, but the absence of sound. And then came footsteps on the metal stairs, ascending, not down, toward him, upward, as if something had entered and was climbing. He waited at the stairwell with a flashlight. Nothing appeared. The steps stopped, silence returned. Next day, Ian searched the entire lighthouse. Every room, every hatch, even the roof. No animals, no signs of entry, except the box. Now it sat outside the closet, in the middle of the stairwell, still moss-covered. He stared at it for a long time, then finally picked it up. It was heavier than expected, swollen with moisture, nailed shut. He left it at the base of the stairs and went outside. That's when he saw the footprints. Bare, wet footprints in the dirt, leading from the north side of the lighthouse toward the cliff's edge. They didn't circle back, just ended at the drop-off into the sea. Ian tried to make sense of it. No boats had come. His ride wasn't due until tomorrow. He thought about calling for early pickup, but with the fog so thick, they might not even reach it. He locked every door and hatch, then jammed the stairwell with a steel pipe. That night was worse. Around 1:30 a.m., the door to the upper beacon room slammed shut. Violently, the whole tower shook. Then came the knocking. 3 slow knocks. From inside the wall. Not the door, not a window, the wall itself. Like someone was behind the plaster, knocking with their knuckles. Ian stayed frozen in his sleeping bag, waiting for it to stop. At sunrise, the box was gone, closet wide open. Ian had enough. He radioed for immediate extraction, saying it was a medical issue. They agreed to try reaching him within a few hours. He packed everything and waited by the ledge. Fog didn't lift. In fact, it got worse. He sat there for 7 hours, unable to see more than a few feet. As the sun began to dip, he heard someone walking on gravel behind the lighthouse, but couldn't see anyone. He ran toward the cliff edge, and didn't move until he heard a boat horn. They pulled him out just after dark. The deckhand who helped him aboard asked why he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Ian just said the lighthouse wasn't safe, and should be sealed. His final report simply said the structure was unsound. He never mentioned the box, or the footprints. He told me later he wasn't sure himself what really happened. Maybe isolation was getting to him. That's where Ian's written account ends. He never returned to that lighthouse, wrapped up his other projects, stopped taking new ones. When I asked if it was because of the lighthouse, he just shrugged and said, "I've seen enough out there." I asked him once, just once, what he thought really happened on that rock. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Some places are meant to be left alone. They just need time and silence." I've looked into the place. The coordinates he scribbled don't match any official map. County records vaguely mention a decommissioned lighthouse, but no name, no photos, no history, like it was erased, like Ian was never there. And that's the part that stays with me. Not what Ian saw, but what nobody else seems to remember. Sometimes it's not the ghosts that scare me, it's the silence they leave behind. Thanks for watching, and remember, some places don't want to be found. This took place during the COVID lockdown period, around the time when everyone was starting to lose it. Stuck indoors for weeks on end, people were bored, restless, and tired of the isolation. I was single back then, and spent most nights scrolling through Tinder or chatting on Instagram while binge-watching whatever show was popular. Because really, what else was there to do during those strange, quiet evenings? One night, I started talking to a girl I'd followed for years on Instagram. Her name was Sophia, but she went by Sophia. We both lived in Suffolk County, Long Island, about 20 to 30 minutes from the Hamptons, and roughly an hour from Montauk. We were both bored out of our minds, and decided to hang out. She lived only 5 minutes away, so I picked her up, and we drove to a local park that had been closed. We sat in the car, drank some White Claws, and talked. Right away, I could tell she had a rebellious streak. In a fun way, she didn't mind sneaking into places, climbing fences, or bending rules. The connection between us sparked instantly. Within an hour, she had this wild idea. Let's drive all the way to Montauk and walk the cliffs around the lighthouse. Now technically, the Montauk Lighthouse was closed after sunset, maybe even fully shut down because of lockdown, but I wasn't totally sure. Still, I was down. I loved the idea of a spontaneous adventure. So we wrapped up our drinks and started heading east toward Montauk Point. When we got there, she told me to just pull into the lighthouse parking lot. I hesitated at first, but she seemed confident. No one would be around, especially not on a random Tuesday night during lockdown in the off-season. The place looked deserted, so I trusted her. She mentioned she'd done this before, even pre-COVID. We parked and had another White Claw, just sitting in the quiet darkness. I kept scanning the area nervously, half expecting security, but Sophia kept brushing it off, telling me to chill. Eventually, we got out and walked toward the lighthouse. Seeing one up close at night is an eerie thing, beautiful but strange. It has a liminal energy, hard to describe. We stayed off the main path to avoid lights or attention. I'd never been to the Montauk Lighthouse before, so I followed her lead. She took us down to a rocky trail behind the lighthouse, known as the Cliff Walk. We were navigating entirely by flashlight. There were no lights along the path, just a few up near the entrance and the rotating beam of the lighthouse itself. As we made our way along the cliffs, careful with each step, I suddenly heard Sophia call my name. I turned around. She was behind me, aiming her flashlight at something in the distance. That's when I saw it. A person standing back on the rocks. We both pointed our lights at him. He wore a hoodie, the hood up, and he appeared to be a black guy, though it was hard to guess his age or much else. I called out, asking if he worked there. No response. He didn't move. I added, "We're leaving. Sorry," assuming maybe he was some kind of security. But then he spoke. "Y'all want to buy some coke?" he asked. That caught me completely off guard. I was relieved he wasn't a guard, but somehow that made it worse. Why was he out here lurking behind us, offering drugs? The whole vibe turned dark fast. I said, "Nah, we're good," and quietly motioned for Sophia to keep moving. I let her walk ahead, and we started down the trail again. The man began walking too, keeping pace, never saying anything else. I kept glancing back. He was always there, same distance, just trailing us silently. It was so creepy and tense that my stomach stayed in knots the whole way. Eventually, we got to the end of the cliff walk and started crossing the grassy field back toward the car. But the guy was still behind us, step for step. Then we heard him again. He called out, "Where are you going?" His tone wasn't casual. It was cold, like he was toying with us. I whispered to Sophia not to answer and to keep moving fast. We didn't run. We didn't want to spark a chase, but our pace quickened. That's when we noticed two more men approaching us from behind. I didn't stop or say anything. I just kept walking, pretending not to notice. One of them called something out too, but I couldn't make out the words. It was all happening so fast. We reached the car and got in, only to scream as we realized the three men had followed us right to the vehicle. I slammed the locks down just in time. Two of them immediately tried the door handles. My heart nearly stopped. I reversed out of the space, trying to avoid hitting them, but they still kicked and hit the sides of the car. Thankfully, they didn't chase us once we pulled away. Driving back, our adrenaline was through the roof. The car was dead quiet. I dropped her off soon after, and we both agreed to call it a night. We did hang out several more times after that, and we still talk, but that night always lingers in my mind. It felt like something bad nearly happened. Too close for comfort. My friends guessed it was a gang, maybe Crips, but honestly I don't care who they were. I've got no plans to ever go back to Montauk after dark again. Some places were never meant to be lived in, only watched from a distance. What happened at that lighthouse is something no manual could prepare them for. It's the kind of story that sticks with you long after the light goes out. Welcome to my viewers. Today's story comes from someone I trust completely, and it's one of the most unsettling accounts I've ever heard. He's been with the Coast Guard for over a decade. Not the kind of guy to exaggerate or chase ghost stories. He's level-headed, rational, and more comfortable with tools and tide charts than tales of the supernatural. He told me this story during the summer of 2022, and I made him repeat it more than once, because of how disturbing it was. Each time, the details stayed identical. This all happened back in 2017. During a routine maintenance rotation, he was sent to a remote lighthouse off the coast of Maine. For 2 weeks, the place was called Martinus Rock. It's way out there, accessible only by boat or helicopter. Nothing more than a jagged island, with a single lighthouse and a small auxiliary shed full of fuel and tools. No power grid, no plumbing, barely a signal. The lighthouse runs on automation, but someone has to physically maintain it once or twice a year. Normally it's a solo job, but due to some prior electrical malfunctions, this time they sent 2 men, Nate and another guy named Russell. The first few days were uneventful. Cold wind, repetitive work. They checked beacon gears, tested backup batteries, cleaned off salt corrosion, and kept the diesel generator running. At night, they passed time reading, eating canned food, and playing cards. It was isolation, sure, but nothing unusual. Then came the 4th night. Around 2 a.m., Nate woke up feeling strange. Not ill, just unsettled, like the air had shifted. He described it like standing under storm clouds, except the sky outside was silent and clear. Something was off. He looked around and realized the beacon wasn't rotating. It's supposed to flash across the ocean every few seconds, regardless of repairs. It was a big deal if it failed. He woke Russell, and together they climbed the spiral staircase to the top of the lighthouse. The gears were still turning, but the light wasn't moving. Something had jammed it. It was a large, soaked cloth, dark, mossy, smelling like rotted seaweed. It looked like a coat or blanket, shoved deep into the mechanism. But how? The room was locked, windows sealed, no birds, no wind. Confused, they tossed the cloth into the sea breeze and went back to bed, thinking it was a freak incident. But then it happened again. The 5th night, just after 2 a.m., Nate noticed the light had stopped again. This time the blockage was different. A smaller piece of fabric like a scarf or shawl. It was old-fashioned, red, frayed, and soaked with seawater. Bits of shell and barnacle clung to it, like it had just come from the ocean floor. That's when the fear crept in. They double-checked the lighthouse doors, windows, supply closet, all locked. They started to suspect they weren't alone. From that point on, they barricaded the stairwell with heavy crates, locked the beacon room after each inspection, and secured their bedroom at night. But on the 7th night, something happened that Nate refuses to rationalize. He said Russell was mumbling in his sleep, only he wasn't speaking to Nate. He was whispering to the corner of the room, as if someone was standing there. When Nate asked him what he was saying, Russell blinked like he'd just woken up, and claimed he hadn't said a word. Later that same night, Nate woke up again. Russell was standing at the window staring out toward the rocks. When asked why, Russell said he'd seen someone down there the night before, standing still just beyond the edge of the beacon's reach, someone watching them. But when the beam rotated back, the figure was gone. From there things got worse. Russell grew withdrawn. He barely slept, barely spoke, just sat by the window, watching. When Nate asked if he was okay, Russell muttered about noises in the wall, about voices whispering from the stairwell. Then on the 9th night, they both heard footsteps. Not creaking wood, real deliberate steps coming down from the top of the tower. Nate saw Russell standing frozen at the base of the stairs, staring upward. He asked if Russell had gone up there. Russell said no. Then he asked Nate the same thing. Neither of them had moved. The steps stopped. The silence after was worse. That night they shoved a dresser against the bedroom door and kept knives under their pillows. By the 11th night, things escalated. Again, the beacon stopped. But this time, when they reached the top of the tower, the door was wide open, blown in like it had been kicked. The wind howled through the room. Inside, the beacon hadn't just malfunctioned, it had been intentionally tampered with. The industrial bulb had been unscrewed and placed upright in the center of the floor. Those bulbs are massive. You can't just twist them out with bare hand. Nate stared, frozen. Russell began whispering, "Someone did this. Then Nate felt something cold graze his back. He turned, nothing. But Russell had gone pale. He pointed at the wall, whispering that he saw a hand emerge from the brick. They ran, bolted the bedroom door, and stayed there until morning. Russell rocked in the corner, whispering to someone only he could see. The next morning, Nate used the emergency satellite phone to request an early pickup, claiming mechanical failure. The boat arrived that afternoon. But here's the part that still gives me chills when the crew met them. They asked about a distress call they received at 2:12 a.m. Nate never made that call. He didn't touch the sat phone until daylight. The deckhand said they'd gotten a garbled message, static, a voice muttering something about not being alone. Then silence. Russell didn't speak during the ride back. A few months later, he quit the Coast Guard. Never gave anyone the real story. Nate still works maintenance assignments from time to time, but he swore to me, with absolute conviction, that he will never return to Martinez Rock.